After 3 shoulder surgeries in a 2-year span and a very tumultuous offseason that included a trade request, St. Louis Blues forward Vladimir Tarasenko is having a monster bounce-back season in 2021-22. We're going to take a look at Tarasenko, the year that he's having, and how much he's helping the Blues be a top team in the Western Conference. Let's go. Hey everybody, so we need to talk about St. Louis Blues forward Vladimir Tarasenko, who is having a huge bounce-back year for the Blues in a season that we didn't even know if he was going to be playing for the Blues after a very tumultuous offseason and a trade request. And there's just a real big story going on here with Tarasenko in St. Louis, and it's been incredible to see him perform the way that he has this year for the Blues. So we were going to take a step back, delve into the entire Tarasenko situation, and then talk about what he's been able to do this year and how important it has been for the St. Louis Blues, who would not be in the situation that they are in as one of the top teams in the Western Conference without Tarasenko playing the way that he has. So before we look at this year, we've got to take a step back. Vladimir Tarasenko has been limited to just 34 total regular season games over the past 2 seasons before this year because of injuries. He's had multiple shoulder surgeries. He's missed a ton of time. And he only played 34 total games. He wasn't overly productive in the games that he was able to play. And it looked like things were headed south for Tarasenko. And it looked like he was headed for a split with the St. Louis Blues, who he's played his entire career with. Now, we get to this coming off season after 2, years where he's barely been able to play. Tarasenko's unhappy with the team and the way that they've handled his injury. Seems to be a lot of division going on between him and the organization, and he ends up requesting a trade this past offseason. It would have been a somewhat risky trade for a general manager to make, and it was a trade that I personally talked about this offseason that I wouldn't have made if I was a general manager. I think, you would have had to have given up too much to get a player who is a huge question mark coming into this season. Now, it turns out I would have been dead wrong, and all the other general managers who didn't want Vladimir Tarasenko were dead wrong as well because he's had a phenomenal season. But no team bit on the trade request. No team wanted to give up what it would have taken to add Tarasenko to their lineup. And he remained a St. Louis Blue. So with no trade, even after the trade request, he had to just buckle down and play this season for the St. Louis Blues. And that might have turned out to have been the best thing possible for both the player and the organization here, because it has been a phenomenal season for Tarasenko and a phenomenal season for the St. Louis Blues. St. Louis right now is fighting at the top of the Central Division with some other great teams like Colorado, Nashville, and Minnesota fighting for playoff position out west. And they very likely are not in as good of a spot as they are right now without Tarasenko and without him playing the way that he has this season. So let's take a look here at what Tarasenko has been able to do this year. 34 games played, 14 goals, 20 assists for 34 points. He's a point-per-game player this year for St. Louis. And this is coming off a season last year where he only played 24 games and had 4 goals, and the year before where he was limited to just 10 games and only had 3 goals. So between 2019-20 and 2020-2021, Tarasenko was limited to just 34 games and scored 7 goals for the St. Louis Blues the past 2 regular seasons before this. This season, he's matched those 34 games and has double the goal total with 14, has also added 20 assists for 34 points in 34 games, and is a point-per-game player once again for St. Louis. Really having one of the best seasons of his entire career. And we haven't seen this in a number of years from Tarasenko, going back to the year that St. Louis won the Stanley Cup, when he had 68 points in 76 games and scored 33 goals that season. And he was a multiple-time 30-goal scorer before that. He hit the 40-goal mark back in 2015-16. But Tarasenko was a very good goal scorer, 30-plus goals for a number of years before these shoulder injuries started to really affect him. And then obviously 2019-2020, only 10 games, only 3 goals. Shoulder becomes a major issue. 2021, 24 games, only 4 goals. Shoulder still an issue for Tarasenko. And then the crazy offseason, this past offseason, really hasn't hindered him at all, and actually he's come back better than ever this year for St. Louis, and that is a really good thing for the Blues because he has been one of their best players without a doubt. If we look at what St. Louis has done, Vladimir Tarasenko leads the team in points so far this season with 34. Jordan Kyrou's right behind him with 33. Pavel Buchnevich has 30, but Tarasenko is the leading point scorer for the St. Louis Blues this year. He is the leading goal scorer for the St. Louis Blues this year, also one ahead of Jordan Kyrou, and has played a huge role in this team being where they're at in the standings in the Central Division, right up there with Nashville, Colorado, and Minnesota, fighting for those playoff positions in the top 4 spots in the Central. And, you know, that is really awesome to see and really kind of unexpected to see. If you told me heading into this year that Vladimir Tarasenko was going to be the leading scorer and the leading point producer of the St. Louis Blues this season, and I would have definitely questioned that going into this year, especially with him coming off the injuries that he's had over the past couple years. But it's really great to see him back healthy and back producing the way that we know Tarasenko can for the St. Louis Blues. Now, unfortunately, today, Tarasenko was placed in COVID protocol for St. Louis, but hopefully he only misses a game or two and is able to come back just as strong and producing at just as high of a level for the Blues when he does return. So now this whole thing kind of circles back to the trade request, because that trade request was still made back in the offseason. It just wasn't met. And Tarasenko may very well still want out of St. Louis and is just being a professional and doing his job while he is still a St. Louis Blue, still waiting for that change of scenery to happen. The way that I see it, there are really 3 potential options here for the St. Louis Blues and Vladimir Tarasenko. The first one being that he does end up getting traded still during the year this year, you know, maybe at the trade deadline. Now, this is the one that I think is least likely to happen. I think it's very hard to make this kind of deal during the season, and personally, I don't think it's going to happen. I think that Vladimir Tarasenko is going to play out at least the rest of this season as a St. Louis Blue. But when you look at that, you know, St. Louis is in a situation where it's going to be difficult for them to move Tarasenko at this point in the regular season or, you know, during the year, because they're not a seller. St. Louis is a team that is contending in the Western Conference and wants to win a Stanley Cup this year. And they're not going to want draft picks or prospects back in return. If they're going to move Tarasenko, they're going to need a replacement for Tarasenko, who is one of their best players. So they would need somebody back in return who is of equal value and equal productivity of Vladimir Tarasenko. And that's just not usually the type of trade we see happen in season. Generally, in-season trades are more of your sellers selling off an older player to buyers in exchange for future assets like draft picks and prospects in return. But the Blues right now aren't really interested in that. They would need a player of equal value back in return. Very unlikely to happen mid-season, in my opinion. And I do think that Tarasenko is going to be a Blue at least for the rest of this year. Then you get to option number 2, which is trade him in the offseason. And this would open up the trade options a little bit more for the Blues because they wouldn't necessarily have to get that replacement for Tarasenko directly back in the trade. You know, they could maybe trade him for a first-round pick and a prospect and then use free agency to fill his spot in the lineup. And it just opens up the options a little bit more in the offseason. So if Tarasenko does still want out of St. Louis and does still want a deal to get done before his contract comes to an end, he could potentially be traded this coming offseason. Then the final option for the Blues and Tarasenko is for him to just play out the rest of his deal and him to stay in St. Louis. you know, maybe the Blues go on a playoff run this year. He gets a little bit happier. He only has 1 year beyond this season on his contract, and maybe he just plays it out with the Blues and then ends up leaving in the offseason after next year when his contract is up and he can hit the open market in free agency. I mean, heck, maybe he could get traded at the deadline next year. Who knows? But at the end of the day, I would think that the Blues would be in a similar situation where they're looking to contend and not really trade him mid-season. But again, that's down the line. Just, there's options here. I don't think he's going to get traded mid-season this year, though. He's too valuable to the Blues, and if they're not getting a replacement back in return for his spot in the lineup, it really doesn't make any sense from St. Louis's standpoint to move him, so I think it's highly unlikely to happen. An off-season trade, I think, is much more doable and much more likely, in my opinion. Or he could just end up playing into next year with St. Louis and possibly play out the entire contract with St. Louis. And then he can make a final decision come free agency of 2023 when he'll have the opportunity to either re-sign or just hit open market and go somewhere else. But there's no doubt Vladimir Tarasenko is having a monster season for the Blues. He's back to his old self. He looks healthy. He's productive. He's scoring at a fantastic rate like he was back when he was scoring 30 plus, maybe even 40 goals in a season. He's got an easy chance to score 30 plus again this season, and that is a very good thing for Vlad Tarasenko, and that is a very good thing for the St. Louis Blues, who are in a good spot out west, and Tarasenko is a big reason why. So great to see him back healthy. Great to see him back performing. And it's been a monster bounce back year for Vlad Tarasenko. But with that, like, comment, share, subscribe, follow on social media. All those links are down in the description. If you'd like to further support the channel, links to our merchandise store, membership, and donations are down in the description as well. Keep spreading the word about this channel. Let's keep this thing growing. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll talk to you guys soon.